Good morning. Welcome once again to the Future Law Virtual Summit, Negotiating the New Normal. My name is Karim Madik. I'm the host today for, I'm going to try it, Ove Jakobsen. Is that right?
Correct.
Oh, that was pretty good. Ove Jakobsen is a professor at the University of Nordland at the Bodo Graduate School of Business, a professor in Ecological Economics, and a master's degrees in philosophy, business, and marketing. More than 30 years of experience. I think this is where we see this interdisciplinary work, philosophy, economics, business administration, systems theory, and art. And your inspiration is thus to contribute in the development of society based on freedom, in solidarity with humanity, animals, and nature. Shall I go on, or do you want to take it from there?
You can start there.
Great.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting conference. And my presentation today will be based upon this book, The Transformative Ecological Economics, published on Routledge in 2017, I think. So let's get started. And I will not talk very much about all the problems we face, more on solutions. But let's start with a description of the situation. From the Global Sustainable Development Report 2019. Not only have we reached a point where we're using our land, water, and atmosphere as a giant garbage dump is no longer viable. The document warns that our current economic system also causing critically widening gaps between rich and poor. We have two options. Maybe we have more, but we have two options that are very diverse. Make widespread, drastic, but controlled challenges to the way we live, or continue as we are, blundering towards disaster. And ecological economics is a field of science and a practice that is focusing upon how can we solve the problems, not only reducing the negative symptoms of the system we have today. So here I refer to a Norwegian professor in philosophy, Gunnar Skirbekk. He published a book last year, where he discussed philosophy of science, a philosophy of science perspective on, for example, UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And he differs between two different problems in a way. On a factual level, different problems that interact and mutually reinforce each other. In other words, we have a practical problem. But what he is more occupied with is the epistemic level, the scientific problem. We have no single science or expertise that grasps the complexity of the problems we are facing. So in other words, he criticized UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals for not being integrated in a way. They are too atomistic in the description. So the challenge for us is to find solutions that integrate different parts of science, and also connect science to practice, and not only that, but also try to express knowledge through artistic media, for example, music, theater, and so on. So that is transdisciplinarity. And transdisciplinarity is the definition, or ecological economics is defined as a transdisciplinary field of science. So in other words, we have an input here to solve some of the problems that Gunnar Skirbekk is discussing in his book. Okay. Why ecological economics? We live in a world of uncertainty, rich in potential. And here is the interesting thing. It is a potential for disaster and at the same time for positive possibilities. And in my focus, the positive possibilities is the main thing here. How can we develop the potential that are in individuals and also in local societies and in the society? What we need is solutions that are systemic and sustainable from a long-term perspective. In traditional economics, they have an extremely short-term perspective, both in time and in space. Instead of building economics and societies on knowledge focused on how to conquer nature, the great challenge of our time is to build and nurture sustainable communities designed in accordance with living nature. So in other words, ecological economics learn from nature, not primarily about nature, but we learn from nature, try to develop an economy and a society in accordance with the principles found in the ecosystems. Research that gives power over nature must be replaced by an approach that teaches us how we can adapt to the principles found in nature. And to illustrate this, I include here an Hungarian philosopher of science, Imre Lakatos. And he have a very interesting distinction between what he called the hardcore and the protective belt in a scientific program. The hardcore is close to what Thomas Kuhn called a paradigm. But the interesting thing and the new thing in Lakatos' perspective is the introduction of the protective belt. In other words, he said every scientific program, for example, neoclassical economics, or the dominating economic paradigm today, hardcore theories, concepts, preconditions that are taken for granted, and questions without, and could not be questions without threatening the whole research program. It's missing a knot in there. Taken for granted and not questions without threatening the whole research program. In other words, we cannot ask critical questions to the hardcore, but we can change something in the protective belt. And the protective belt is theories and concepts that can be changed in order to protect the hardcore. And for example, here, if a part of the hardcore economy today is growth, physical growth, we can say that we can change that. We can reduce the negative impact of growth if we go to the protective belt and start talking about green growth. Green growth better than growth. And according to Lakatos, this could be a solution, but it could also be a problem because we are hiding the problems instead of solving the deep challenges. As an example here, we can say that green economy changes in the protective belt. And here I refer to the Canadian economist William Rees, and he says, green economy has to a small degree helped to solve the major environmental challenges. Instead, green economy are often focused on hiding problems behind environmental friendly words and concepts, green growth, green marketing, sustainable competitiveness, and so on. And definition of circular economy is very illustrating. Ken Webster, one of the most influential contributors in circular economy, says, a circular economy is led by business for a profit within the rules of the game, higher competitiveness, higher resource security, and material efficiency. The rules of the game. In other words, not asking questions to the hardcore. We can change everything in the protective belt, but not ask questions to competition, to growth, and all these hardcore preconditions in the dominating economy today. The next philosopher of science I want to refer to is Paul Feyerabend. And he is more direct, and I think it's a great inspiration if we want to come up with new solutions, to have some knowledge about Paul Feyerabend's philosophy. He says that to reach any new understanding, we have to ask questions that challenge and contradict well-established theories. The consistent condition demanding that new hypotheses are consistent with accepted theory serves to keep the older theories in place. In other words, when we have students and the student come to his or her supervisor, and the supervisor says, you have to put your research problem or your hypothesis into a chapter of well-established theories, then Feyerabend says we have a guarantee for not coming up with new and radical answers. So it's a way of saving the hardcore of any research program, to say that all kinds of questions should be put into an accepted theoretical framework. What Feyerabend says, instead, we have to ask questions to the established theoretical fundament. Success for scientists has traditionally involved non-scientific elements. And this is not a normative sentence. According to Feyerabend, he had studied history and found that all big breakthroughs in science comes from scientists asking new questions. asking questions to the established theories. So this is in a way, an historical fact, ask critical questions. But it must be said here that not everybody should do that all the time. Puzzle solving within the paradigm is also very important. But sometimes we have to ask questions when we see that when the anomalies are too big to be solved within the existing paradigm. And I think the situation is just as that now. We have big problems with increasing gap between rich and poor. We have trouble with the climate change. We also talked about extinction of species and so on and so forth. So I think the time is right for asking questions to the paradigm or to the hardcore of a dominating economic system. Erich Fromm, the humanitarian psychologist, said in 1955, reform can be radical, that is going to its roots, and that is what Feyerabend asked for. Or it can be superficial, trying to patch up the system without touching the causes. And that is the same as Lakatos called the protective belt. Okay, a step further. The conceptual framework for ecological economics. Ecological economics refers to economic theory and practice that try to find economy as operating within rather than dominating the spheres, nature, society, culture. And ecological economics refer to an economic system that is consistent and honors the basic principles of ecology, which ultimately are identical with what we call the systemic principles of life. The only valid purpose of economy is to serve life processes in all kinds of social and ecological systems. In other words, here we have an introduction of an organic worldview of how we understand the world as a living entity, not as a machine. So here we have one of the most fundamental changes from the traditional or the dominating economy and ecological economics. The change is on ontological level. We change from a mechanical understanding of the world to an organic. And we have some preconditions here. Economics has to be embedded in society and ecological life support systems. So in other words, we must develop an economy that is decentralized into local societies, regions, depending on the region's culture and also the ecosystems, the nature in that area. So economy is not the same all over the world. It will be integrated in the local conditions, cultural conditions, and also concerning nature or ecosystems. We cannot understand or manage the economy without understanding the whole interconnected system. In other words, the definition you find in traditional textbooks in economy that the market is a competition between autonomous actors. This could be correct in a mechanical worldview, but in an organic worldview, there are no entities or actors that are not connected to the others. So in other words, we change from a competitive atomistic market to integrated networks. Development is defined as improvement of sustainable well-being, not growth in consumption. From quantitative growth to qualitative development. And that is also what we find in nature, more and more complex human beings. We are growing till we are 16, 17 years old, maybe physically. After that, we develop. And the same idea concerns society. When we have come to a certain level in material welfare, it's time for focusing upon growth in qualitative, not growth, but qualitative development, cultural development, and all other aspects. So in other words, enough is enough in a way. We should not increase the consumption and production exponentially into the future. We should say that in most of the Western countries, we have enough, maybe too much, but we have a not fair distribution. So the challenge is not producing more, but to have a fair distribution of what we have. A healthy balance between nature, human beings, culture, and economy is the basic idea here. Okay. And then the next step in my thinking goes through utopian thinking. Now we are focusing, coming closer to the solutions. And utopian thinking comes from Thomas More, Englishman, trying to explain or understand his society in the 15th century He said to understand England, we have to take a step outside. We must have a view from outside. And that was what he called utopia, and a perspective from outside. So utopia is not about something strange or unreal or all these things that we very often connect to utopia. It's a way of understanding the world we're living in by defining a place outside to have an outside perspective. So if you define ideology here, it's the actuality, what is today, what is, and utopia, what could be. And if you refer to Aristotle, he used the concepts actuality and potentiality back in the Greek antique. So we see this is a very long tradition. The distinction between ideology and utopia comes from Karl Mannheim. It's also an Hungarian sociologist, and from the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur. Both of them published books called Ideology and Utopia. And they said, what I'm referring to now, the tension between what is and what could be gives energy and direction for change. So the challenge today is to define these utopian ideas. And we ask people themselves, people in the local society, develop their own utopian idea about how they want the future to be. So this is not an expert, a task for experts. This is a task for people living in big cities, local areas in big cities, or in the countryside. But okay, ideology. Ideology describes the presence from inside. It's rooted in the ideas of the dominant social groups in a democracy, refers to accepted norms and values, and justifies authorities. So this is what we can say is a well-ordered society, and that is a good thing. So it's not a question of ideology or utopia. It's a tension between these two things. And utopia understands the presence from outside, is somewhere else, geared towards the future. Should not be realized. It should only work in that. We should only work in that direction. So I think the rainbow is a very good illustration here. We can walk towards the rainbow, but we will never reach it. It will always change position. And it is exactly the same with utopian thinking. We have to focus upon how we want the future to be, and this is a process going on all the time. It's not something that is finished. Now we have the solution. That is very dangerous. It's not a solution, it's a process. So therefore we can say that this way of thinking is connected to process philosophy. Okay, and the change, what is it? Yeah, the deep change here, when we challenge the hardcore, or do as Feyerabend asked us, ask critical questions to the hardcore, to the established theories. Then we can change from saying that economy is the context for understanding nature. Today we say that nature has value because it could be sold on the market, oil, carrots, potatoes, everything you found in nature, entities could have a price tag and be sold on the market. When you do that, the connections, the relations between things disappear, and you have a dead material. When you have a price tag on all different things in nature, the relations between all these entities are gone, and when they are gone, also the idea about life is gone. So therefore, when we have a society where economy defines the context or represents the context for understanding both nature and also culture, we are in deep trouble because the living aspect of both society and nature have disappeared. But when we change here to say that ecology is the context, we understand economy and society from an ecological perspective, then the life processes are in focus. So therefore we have to develop a kind of economy that is integrated. So instead of talking about growth, we talk about development. Instead of talking about competition on an atomistic market, we talk about cooperation in networks, decentralized networks. And instead of using the military concept strategy, meaning make a plan to beat your enemies, we have a partnership approach. We try to develop solutions in cooperation with other actors on the market and also in the culture and society. And Paul Ricoeur said, without utopia, ideology becomes static. Without utopian thinking, we have no inspiration to make changes and to develop further. But the other thing is also very important. Without ideology, utopia becomes a mirage. So utopian thinking must be connected to reality. And therefore we can talk about realistic utopia. And that is a concept from Anthony Giddens. He used that, realistic utopia. Okay. And then we can say that, I have an illustration of what I mean. Students in economics and business administration meet this figure the first day at the bachelor study. Economy is about production, distribution, and consumption. But very soon we find out that something comes in and something goes out. Material and energy. Without material and energy, nothing happens in the economy, and there will always be an output. And this is a definition of life in a way. Every living organism have input and output. And where does this input and output come from? Nature. So this is the first and most important circular connection, and that is between economy and nature. And this is not focused in any textbooks in economics or marketing or different topics in business administration. So this is something that we must focus more on, the connection between economy and nature. That means that the students in economy must learn something about ecology and nature. And this is almost totally absent today. This is the first connection. The second connection is the circular connections within the economy. So instead of talking about waste, going back to nature, we say that different fractions, for example, paper, glass, plastic, so on, could be reprocessed and go back into production. And that this circulation within the economy is what is focused in circular economy today, I think. And that means that they are only focusing upon circular economy as an instrument or a way to increase growth instead of solving problems in the connection between economy and nature. But we have also a connection down here in between culture and economy. Without knowledge, the economy could not function. So we need knowledge, and we learn from our knowledge, from practice on the output side, on the right side here. We have more knowledge and values than we have at the input side. In the circulation between economy and nature, it's less. The entropy is increasing between input and output. So in the future, economists and people in business administration should have knowledge about what is within the circle, but they must also have knowledge about culture and nature. And as I said, this is almost totally missing in the programs in both bachelor and master programs in economics. So the next thing here is, how can we explain these things? Yeah, I will say that we have different connections here. And if we start with the worldview, as I said, we have to change from a mechanistic to an organic understanding of the world we're living in. And I think this is not very controversial today. Most people would accept that the world we're living is both society and nature is more like a living entity, living organism, than a dead mechanism. And if you change from a mechanistic to an organic worldview, then we must change from atomistic competition to cooperative networks. And on the individual level, I have not mentioned that so far, but here is a very important change from rationality defined as to be an economic man. And the economic man is a person maximizing his or her own utility, very often measured on a monetary scale. So in other words, rationality in economics is to be a complete egoist. And this is not a very good strategy or a very good plan if we want to come deeper into the challenges we are facing. From an organic perspective, we are ecological human beings, all of us. We are integrated in nature. And then rationality will change from being an egoist, maximizing your own utility, to saying that rationality is to take care of the whole system, the whole living system. And now we come to a very interesting thing, and that is practice. Because today we say to people in business, you should be environmental and social responsible. You should be responsible in your work, in your companies, in your firms, in business, without asking questions to the image of man and to the system. And to change to be sustainable, to be responsible for nature and society, without changing the idea about on systems level and image of man, it is almost impossible to do anything. If you should maximize profits within a system based upon competition, it's very hard to find deeper solutions. So therefore, we can say that most of the work today will be green, and some call it greenwashing, to be to say it in a little bit negative way. But it is not necessarily negative, because it's better to do something than nothing. But the main thing here is to go under the symptoms and find out where can we find the causes behind the problems. And I think the causes is in this figure. The image of man, the concept of rationality have to change, and our idea about how the market functions should also change. And this is a consequence of a deeper reflection on ontological level. So therefore, philosophy of science is a very important part of the curriculum in business schools, I think, should be, in addition to, for example, ethics and knowledge about ecology. Okay, next step. Here is dimensions in the change process. This is developed together with some social banks in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They want to find out how can we distinguish between good and bad projects. We come up with this idea. This is not a list that includes everything that is important, and maybe some of the criteria here could be eliminated in many different situations, but it is a good illustration anyway. If you have a project, is it more in the direction of atomistic competition, or does it lead to development of cooperative networks? Is it focused upon qualitative growth or qualitative development? Is it linear value change or circular value change? Is it including bottom-up initiatives? Are people participating, co-producers, co-workers, or is this a project defined from the top? Bottom-up, top-down. Or is it negative freedom? Negative freedom means freedom from regulations from outside. We can see that the 4 freedoms in the EU, free people, money or finance, products and services, that is a negative freedom. We can do things without regulations from outside. The positive freedom concerns our ability, our possibilities to develop our own potential individually and collectively in the local societies or in the society. And the last criteria I mentioned here is that defines the change between, on the ideology side, we have the green economy. On the utopian side, we have ecological economics. So ecological economics is more focused upon fairness than efficiency. But it's not a question of the one or the other. But in addition to be efficient, we should also focus upon fairness. And the problem in the traditional or the dominating economy today is that it is depends on utilitarian ethics. And in utilitarian ethics, the focus is on maximizing the total utility, not about fairness. So therefore, we have to include fairness. We have to develop a fair economy, not only an efficient economy. And that is the Sustainable Development Goal #1, to eliminate poverty in all its forms all over the world within a time limit on 10 years. It's a very, it could be difficult to reach that goal without making these deeper changes. And then we come very soon to the end. I refer back to Plato, 2,300 years back in time. He said that social security for all, that is also part of the global acceptance today. All people should have food, clothes, and housing. Plato say poverty is the mother of revolution and crime. And here come some examples, and these examples are found in a UN document called "Wake Up Before It's Too Late." It can be found on easy Google search. Wake up before it's too late. We have different concrete examples here. We should develop material consumption should be minimized and maximizing quality of life. And here we refer to the psychologist Eric Fromm, to be rather than to have. An organization that promotes collaboration for the common good, that based upon self-organized, locally based dynamic networks. And we should also have food systems that take care of the soil, plants, animals, and humans. Local food for local markets. It's interesting to see that Thomas More, in his book about Utopia in 1516, said that the most important thing for England is to have more local food for local markets, 500 years back in time. Today, it's more relevant than ever. Decentralized solutions for all materials, circular economy, small-scale technology, and communities characterized by diversity. And this is something we learn from nature. Diversity means resilience. And that is something that is needed in most local and societies and regions today. And this is the final picture.
We have
to succeed in realizing the good life in the good society depends on our ability to understand the basic principles of ecology and to develop and practice an economic system accordingly. We must realize that we never will find solutions to our current challenges using the old maps, referring to Feyerabend. To do more than reducing negative symptoms, we need deeper systemic change. The only valid purpose of the economy is to serve the life processes in all kinds of social and ecological systems, and that is very different from maximizing GDP and maximizing profit and increasing growth using more resources than we have. And here is a very good answer from Ruth Levitas. She is professor in sociology at the University of Brighton, I think it was, and she has a Center for Utopian Research, and he said, when people criticize you for coming up with solutions that are utopian in the strange definition, you should answer, utopia is not about the impossible. What is really impossible is to carry on as we are. We have to change. So that was the end. How we want the future to be, instead of asking how the future will be. We are responsible for the future. We should cooperate. We are co-responsible. And here is my main source of inspiration for my work in ecological economics, Kenneth Bowling, an American and English economists. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Irva. Thank you very much. We have time left for exactly one question. We went a little bit over, but I just want to check in the audience if there's a question that's burning. Otherwise, I definitely have one, but I'd love to give that opportunity to anybody in the audience who might have it. And I will just take it away. So you spoke. It was very enlightening. So thank you very much for that. You spoke of the hard core of the system, yeah, and the protective vest around it. And that protective vest is really to make sure this, basically the vested, how I would explain it at least, the vested interest, the status quo stays as it is. Yeah. Somebody's spoken in the past about the power of the pen is obviously mightier than the sword, especially in economics, how the economists of our time rewrite basically the big stories. How do you think we can really start rewriting those big stories? Have you discovered compelling narratives out there that are as compelling, if you will, as capitalism is?
Yeah. We are working with a method that we call utopian workshops, and then we are always invited. We are not good at pushing this into people, but you are invited to local societies, small communities in big cities, or as I said, in the countryside. And what we do there is the participants in the workshop tell their stories about how they experience the good life in the good society, examples of how they experience it. And from that, we can draw some, should we say, some fundamental values, some values that are common in all these different stories. And that is the first part of it. And all these values are very often connected to quality of life, to the social dimension, how we behave towards other people, what we do together with other people, and how we have a relation to, for example, nature. they almost never say something about they want 5 cars or bigger houses or all these things. But that is because we have all these things, you see. So if you are in a country with where poverty is more critical, you will have other answers. But in our part of the world, people say we have enough of the material, we want something else. And the next part of a utopian workshop is to make people to open up for concrete examples, and the participants define their own projects that they want to work with. And this is always a positive image. They have always a positive energy. They are always co-responsible in a way. They do not criticize anything, but they say we want to participate in developing our own local society in this and that direction. Sometimes it means that we must have some changes from the top, from changing from political level, saying that you are allowed to do this or that, or maybe it has something to do with money. We have need some resources. But the third step in a utopian workshop is to see how the different projects are interconnected. How can we work together to make these different ideas into practice? And the question is this enough to change and to come up with good solutions on a global level? I don't know. But it is very interesting to work in this way and to see that people have a very positive and a lot of energy if they are allowed to take part in it and to be part of the solution instead of waiting for from solutions from the top, politics or economics or anything. We want to participate, and I think that is it's called the global citizenship thinking. We should all connect in a way, different organizations, NGOs, and all, everything, to come up with some more power together to make these changes. And I think at the university where I am, the most important thing is to introduce philosophy, social sciences, and also knowledge within ecology and natural sciences into the business studies. And if you do that, maybe something could be could change. But if it's fast enough or go deep enough, I don't know.
I love that answer because I'm a facilitator of workshops and learning programs myself. So I'm very curious about your workshop, and I'll look into it, and I'll reach out otherwise. Thank you very much, Ove. Thank you very much for this. Our time is up, but I hope you will stay around for what is coming up. We're going to hear, actually, I can actually give it right over to the next moderator because he's in my screen. Adam, you probably want to just take it over for me. Thank you, Ove. Ove Jakobsen, and I hope you will remain with us to negotiate the new normal.